I woke up Monday morning to find a construction crew setting up equipment on my fabrication yard. And that was when I knew my life was about to get complicated in ways I never imagined. My name is Walter Reynolds, and I run a custom metal fabrication business out of my property in Henderson, Nevada, just outside Las Vegas. The property sits on 2 acres, with my house at the front and my workshop and fabrication yard taking up the back 1.5 acres. I have been doing this for 15 years, building everything from custom car parts to architectural metalwork for businesses around the valley. The property predates the housing development that sprouted up around me by about 10 years, which has been a source of tension lately. I threw on my jeans and a work shirt, not even bothering with coffee before I stormed outside. There were 4 guys in high-visibility vests unloading metal panels from a flatbed truck. The panels looked like corrugated steel walls, each about 8 feet tall and maybe 4 feet wide. "Hey!" I shouted, crossing my gravel yard. "What the hell is going on here?" One of the guys, a heavy-set man with a clipboard, turned to me with a confused expression. "We are just doing what we were contracted to do, sir. Setting up the community Labyrinth." "Community what?" I stopped in front of him, looking at the mountain of metal panels on my property. "This is private property, my property." "Who hired you?" He flipped through papers on his clipboard. "The Henderson Estates Homeowners Association. We got a work order signed by a Patricia Matthews, HOA president. Says right here we are supposed to install a decorative walking labyrinth on this lot." My blood pressure spiked. Patricia Matthews. Of course it was her. The woman had been a thorn in my side since she moved into the development 3 years ago and immediately got herself elected HOA president. She had tried multiple times to force me to join the HOA, despite my property being clearly outside their jurisdiction. "Let me see that." I grabbed the clipboard and scanned the work order. Sure enough, it listed my address and had Patricia's flowing signature at the bottom. "This is fraud. You are on private property without permission. I need you to pack up and leave now." The foreman scratched his head. "Look, buddy, we got paid half up front for this job. We are not leaving until it is done. Take it up with the HOA if you have a problem." "I am taking it up with you right now. This is trespassing, and if you do not leave in the next 5 minutes, I am calling the police." Another worker, younger with a bandana tied around his head, laughed. "Come on, man. We have got permits and everything. The lady showed us all the paperwork, said this was HOA common area." "Does this look like common area to you?" I gestured at my workshop, which had my business name painted on the side in 6-foot letters. "That is my workshop. This is my fabrication yard. See all those metal supplies? Those are mine. I own this property free and clear, and it has never been part of your HOA. The foreman looked less certain now. He pulled out his phone and stepped away to make a call. I could hear him trying to reach someone at the HOA office. Meanwhile, his crew just stood around awkwardly, waiting for direction. I went back inside and grabbed my phone, pulling up my property deed and survey documents. I had scanned everything into digital files years ago specifically because I knew the HOA would eventually try something. When I came back out, the foreman was just hanging up. "Nobody is answering at the HOA office," he said. "But look, we have a signed contract. We are supposed to start today." I shoved my phone in his face, showing him the property survey with the boundaries clearly marked. "See this? This entire area is my property. The HOA boundaries end at the street. They have no authority here, no ownership, nothing. If you start building on my land, I will have you arrested for trespassing and sue your company for every dime you have got." The foreman studied the documents, his confidence visibly draining. He looked at the survey, then at the work order, then back at me. "This is not right. The HOA told us they own this parcel." The HOA lied to you, probably hoping I would just accept it once it was built. Now are you going to leave, or do I need to make that call to the police? He sighed heavily and turned to his crew. Pack it up, guys. We are not doing this today. What? The younger worker protested. We already unloaded half the truck. I said pack it up. This guy has got proof he owns the property. I am not getting arrested over Patricia Matthews and her bullshit. It took them another 40 minutes to reload all the metal panels onto the truck. I stood watch the entire time, making sure they did not try anything stupid. Once they finally rumbled off down the street, I went inside and made that coffee I had skipped earlier. My hands were shaking with anger. This was not the first time Patricia had tried something, but it was definitely the most brazen. 6 months ago, she had sent me a letter demanding I paint my workshop to match the neighborhood color scheme. I had ignored it. 3 months ago, she had tried to fine me for having commercial vehicles parked on my property, even though it was zoned for business use. I had sent her a strongly worded letter from my attorney. Last month, she had called code enforcement on me, claiming I was running an illegal business. The inspector had laughed when he saw all my proper permits and licenses. But this, trying to actually build something on my property, that crossed a line. I called my attorney, a sharp woman named Rachel Chen who specialized in property law. She listened to my explanation and asked me to email her photos of everything, including the work order the construction crew had shown me. Walter, this is actionable, she said. She committed fraud by misrepresenting ownership of your property. She also likely violated contractor licensing laws by signing a work order for property she does not own. And if she used HOA funds to pay for this, that is embezzlement. What can we do about it? First, I am going to send a cease and desist letter to the HOA and personally to Patricia Matthews. Then we are going to file a complaint with the Nevada Real Estate Division, which oversees HOAs. Depending on how she responds, we might pursue criminal charges. Do it. All of it. I am done playing nice with these people. I spent the rest of Monday trying to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting back to Patricia and her schemes. Around 2 in the afternoon, my phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize, but the area code was local. Walter Reynolds, I answered. Mr. Reynolds, this is Patricia Matthews from the Henderson Estates HOA. Her voice was syrupy sweet, the kind of fake nice that set my teeth on edge. I understand there was a misunderstanding this morning with our construction crew. Misunderstanding. You tried to build on my property without permission. That is called trespassing and fraud, Patricia. Oh, now, there is no need for that kind of language. We simply had some incorrect information in our files. I thought your property was part of the HOA common areas. Bullshit. You have been trying to force me into your HOA for 3 years. You know exactly where the boundaries are. Her voice turned cold. Mr. Reynolds, there is no call for profanity. I am trying to resolve this matter professionally. Then here is how we resolve it professionally. You stay off my property. You stop trying to exert authority you do not have. And you are going to receive a letter from my attorney by end of business tomorrow. If you ever try something like this again, I will pursue criminal charges. That is quite an overreaction to a simple mistake. It was not a mistake, Patricia. It was fraud. Now do not contact me again except through my lawyer. I hung up before she could respond. My heart was pounding, but I felt good. I had been too passive before, just brushing off her harassment as the actions of a bored busybody. But this required a real response. Tuesday morning, I was in my workshop working on a custom gate for a client in Summerlin when I heard vehicles pulling up outside. I walked to the roll-up door and looked out to see not 1 but 3 trucks from the same construction company, all loaded with those metal panels. The same foreman from yesterday got out, but this time he had a different attitude. He marched up to me with a new work order. "Mr. Reynolds, we have been instructed by the HOA to proceed with the installation. They have assured us this is proper HOA property, and they have provided additional documentation." I looked at the additional documentation, which was just a letter on HOA letterhead claiming they had an easement for community improvements on my property. It was completely fabricated. "I told you yesterday this is private property. Nothing has changed. You are trespassing." "Sir, we have a contract and we have been paid. If you interfere with our work, the HOA will take legal action against you." I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. "Yeah, I need police at 4847 Industrial Way in Henderson. I have trespassers on my property who are refusing to leave after being asked." The foreman's eyes widened. "Are you serious right now, completely? I told you yesterday this is my property. I showed you the deed. You left. Now you are back, which means you are knowingly trespassing. Stay right there until the police arrive. This is insane. We are just trying to do our job. Your job does not include breaking the law." 2 Henderson Police Department cruisers arrived within 10 minutes. I showed the officers my property deed, survey, and the fraudulent work order. The foreman showed them his contracts with the HOA. The senior officer, a calm man in his 40s named Officer Dawson, reviewed everything carefully. "All right, here is what we have got," Officer Dawson said. "Mr. Reynolds clearly owns this property. The HOA does not have any legitimate claim to it based on these documents. However, the construction company seems to have been misled by the HOA rather than acting maliciously." He turned to the foreman. "Sir, I am going to advise you to leave this property immediately and not return unless Mr. Reynolds gives explicit permission. If you come back, you will be arrested for trespassing. Your dispute about payment is a civil matter between you and the HOA." The foreman looked furious, but he nodded. "Fine, but we are suing the HOA for the full contract amount plus damages." "That is your right," Officer Dawson said. "Now please leave." After the construction crew left for the second time, Officer Dawson took a detailed report. "Mr. Reynolds, I am going to pass this information along to our fraud division. It sounds like this HOA president might be engaged in some kind of scheme. Do you know if she has tried this with anyone else?" "I have no idea. I am the only non-HOA property that borders the development." "Still, filing false work orders, misrepresenting property ownership, that is serious stuff. Someone will be in touch." The officer left, and I finally got back to work, though my concentration was shot. Around noon, my attorney called. "Walter, I sent the cease and desist letter this morning by courier and email. I also filed a formal complaint with the Nevada Real Estate Division. But I just got off the phone with Patricia Matthews' attorney, and things are getting interesting." "What do you mean?" She is doubling down. "Her attorney claims the HOA has a legitimate interest in your property because it is surrounded by HOA common areas, and they are trying to invoke some obscure Nevada statute about landlocked improvement rights." "That is insane. My property is not landlocked. It fronts on Industrial Way." "I know. It is a completely frivolous argument, but it tells me she is not going to back down easily. Her attorney also claims you are interfering with legitimate HOA business and threatened to sue you for harassment." I laughed bitterly. "Of course she did. So what is our next move?" "I am filing for a temporary restraining order preventing the HOA or anyone acting on their behalf from entering your property. That should stop any more construction attempts. Then we wait for the Real Estate Division to investigate." Wednesday morning, I arrived at my workshop to find the metal Labyrinth panels dumped in a huge pile right in the middle of my fabrication yard. I stood there, coffee in hand, staring at what had to be at least 200 metal panels scattered across my work area, blocking access to my equipment and supplies. Someone had come during the night and just dumped everything like trash. I immediately called Officer Dawson, who came out with another officer to document everything. They took photos and measurements while I walked around the pile, getting angrier by the minute. "This is at least 50,000 pounds of metal," I told the officers. "They blocked my entire work area. I cannot get to my tools, I cannot move my materials, I cannot do my job." Officer Dawson nodded grimly. "This is criminal mischief at minimum, possibly vandalism and illegal dumping. Do you have security cameras?" "I do, but they only cover the workshop entrance and the front gate. The yard is too big to cover completely. Whoever did this must have come in from the back, through the vacant lot." The other officer, a younger woman named Officer Ramirez, was examining the fence line. "There are fresh tire tracks back here, and someone cut through the fence. Looks like they used bolt cutters on the chain link." I walked over to look. Sure enough, a section of my fence had been cut open wide enough to drive a truck through. The tracks showed multiple vehicles had entered and dumped their loads before leaving the same way. "I want whoever did this arrested," I said. "This is deliberate sabotage of my business." Officer Dawson was already on his radio calling for a detective. "This goes beyond simple trespassing now. This is organized criminal activity. We are going to get to the bottom of this." Detective Sarah Morrison arrived around 10. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who specialized in property crimes. She spent 2 hours documenting everything, taking photos, collecting tire track impressions, and interviewing me about the ongoing dispute with the HOA. "Mr. Reynolds, I am going to be straight with you," she said. "This has Patricia Matthews written all over it, but proving it is going to be tricky. Construction companies keep records of where they dump materials, so we will start there, but I need you to do something for me." "What?" "Do not touch any of this metal until we complete our investigation. I know it is blocking your work, but it is evidence. We need to trace where it came from and who authorized dumping it here." I looked at the massive pile and sighed. "How long is that going to take?" "Hopefully just a few days." "I will make it a priority." After Detective Morrison left, I called Rachel Chen and updated her. She was thrilled. "This is perfect, Walter. Well, not perfect for you obviously, but perfect for our case. Patricia just handed us multiple criminal charges. Let me make some calls." I spent the rest of Wednesday and all of Thursday redirecting client meetings and explaining why I could not complete jobs on schedule. The metal pile sat in my yard like a monument to Patricia's spite. Several clients drove by just to see it, and word spread quickly through the local fabrication community about the crazy HOA president who was sabotaging my business. Friday morning, Detective Morrison called with an update. We traced the metal panels. They were purchased by the HOA using their Community Improvement Fund. The construction company reported that Patricia Matthews personally called them Wednesday evening and told them to dump all the materials at your address because the project was canceled. She told them you had agreed to dispose of the materials in exchange for keeping them. That is a complete lie. I know. The construction company is cooperating fully. They even recorded the phone call per their standard practice. We have Patricia on tape instructing them to dump the materials on your property. She never mentioned anything about you agreeing to it until I questioned her yesterday, and then she suddenly had that story. So, what happens now? I am getting an arrest warrant. Patricia Matthews is going to be charged with criminal mischief, illegal dumping, fraud, and criminal trespass. The district attorney is also looking at the bigger picture of her fraudulent work orders and misuse of HOA funds. Good. When will you arrest her? Probably Monday. We want to make sure all our paperwork is airtight because she is already lawyered up and making noise about suing the department. I hung up feeling vindicated but also exhausted. This whole situation had consumed my week, cost me thousands in lost business, and I still had a giant pile of metal blocking my yard. Then an idea hit me. I called Detective Morrison back. The metal panels in my yard, what happens to them eventually? Well, they are evidence for now, but once the case is resolved, the HOA would technically own them. Why? Because the HOA dumped them on my property as trash. In Nevada, if someone abandons property on your land, it becomes yours. I want to check if I can claim them. She laughed. You would have to talk to a lawyer about that, but I like the way you think. Let me check with the DA about releasing the evidence. We have plenty of photos and documentation. I called Rachel Chen next and explained my idea. She was quiet for a moment, then started laughing. Walter, that is brilliant. Under Nevada law, if someone illegally dumps material on your property and you can demonstrate they abandoned it, you can file for abandoned property ownership. Given that Patricia specifically told the construction company to dump it and leave it, that is pretty clear abandonment. And since it is blocking your business operations, you have grounds to remove it as a nuisance. So I can keep it, potentially. Let me file a motion with the court. But even better, if you can document the value of the metal and then sell it, you can offset your business losses. And it sends a message that Patricia's schemes not only failed, but actively cost the HOA money. Monday morning, Detective Morrison arrested Patricia Matthews at her home. I was not there, but I heard about it from multiple neighbors who called or texted me. Apparently, Patricia had screamed about persecution and discrimination and threatened to sue everyone involved. She was booked on 4 criminal charges and released on bond by that afternoon. The HOA held an emergency meeting Monday evening. I was not a member and could not attend, but one of the homeowners who lived near me, a friendly guy named Tom Chen, filled me in afterward. It was absolute chaos, Tom said. About half the residents want Patricia to resign immediately. The other half think she is being railroaded, and that you are the real problem. Patricia showed up even though her lawyer probably told her not to, and she spent an hour ranting about how you are trying to destroy the neighborhood. Did she say anything about the charges? She claims they are all false and politically motivated. She says you have connections with the police department somehow, and that the construction company is lying to avoid liability. Most people are not buying it, though. The treasurer revealed that Patricia spent almost $40,000 of HOA funds on this Labyrinth project without proper approval from the board. $40,000 for those metal panels. Apparently, she also paid for planning, permits that were never legitimate, and a bunch of other stuff. The board is getting an emergency audit done. Tuesday, Rachel Chen got approval from both the district attorney and the court to proceed with claiming the abandoned metal as my property. Detective Morrison released the scene, and I finally had access to my yard again. But now, I had a new problem. What to do with 50,000 pounds of corrugated steel panels? I spent Tuesday afternoon examining the metal. The panels were actually decent quality, galvanized steel with weather-resistant coating. Each panel was probably worth $40 to $50 retail. With over 200 panels, that was at least $8,000 worth of metal, probably more. I made some calls to scrap yards around Las Vegas. The going rate for clean steel scrap was about $300 per ton. 50,000 pounds was 25 tons, so around $7,500. Not great, but not bad for trash someone dumped in my yard. Then I had a better idea. I called a buddy of mine, Marcus Webb, who ran a metal supply company in North Las Vegas. He specialized in buying overstock and discontinued materials and reselling them to contractors and fabricators at a discount. Marcus, how would you like to buy 200 pristine 8-foot corrugated steel panels for half of wholesale? He was interested immediately. We negotiated for 20 minutes and settled on $12,000 for the entire lot. He would handle pickup and transportation. I would provide documentation that I legally owned the metal. Wednesday morning, Marcus showed up with a truck and crew. It took them 4 hours to load all the panels and haul them away. When they finished, Marcus handed me a check for $12,000. Pleasure doing business with you, Walter. If that HOA dumps any more free metal in your yard, give me a call. I deposited the check and immediately called Rachel Chen to let her know. She was delighted. Perfect. This actually strengthens our position significantly. You disposed of a nuisance that was damaging your business, and you recouped some of your losses. The fact that you got fair market value proves you acted reasonably. Now let me do something fun. What? I am going to send Patricia Matthews and the HOA board a letter informing them that you have taken ownership of the abandoned metal and sold it. I am also going to include an invoice for the business losses you incurred while the metal blocked your yard, the cost of repairing your fence, and your legal fees to date. How much are we talking? About $18,000. Between lost contracts, legal fees, and repairs, that is more than reasonable. And Walter, they are going to lose their minds. She was right. Thursday morning, I got a furious voicemail from Patricia's attorney accusing me of theft and demanding I return the metal or pay the HOA $40,000. Rachel sent a calm response citing the Nevada abandoned property statutes, the police reports documenting illegal dumping, and pointing out that Patricia was currently under criminal indictment for the actions that led to the dumping. By Thursday afternoon, 2 more HOA board members had resigned in protest. Tom Chen texted me that the remaining board was in crisis mode, trying to figure out how to distance themselves from Patricia while also dealing with the financial mess she had created. Friday, the local news picked up the story. A reporter from a Las Vegas TV station called me asking for an interview. I agreed, and they came out that afternoon to film. The reporter, a young woman named Jennifer Vega, was fascinated by the whole saga. She filmed my workshop, the repaired fence, and had me explain the timeline of events. Then she interviewed Tom Chen and another homeowner who was willing to speak on camera about the dysfunction in the HOA. The story aired Friday evening. They titled it, HOA Gone Wild. President faces criminal charges after illegal dumping. It was a 6-minute segment that laid out everything from Patricia's initial attempts to force me into the HOA to the illegal construction attempts to the metal dumping. They even got a statement from Detective Morrison confirming the criminal charges. Patricia's attorney tried to get on camera to defend her, but his statements were so obviously spin that they just made things worse. He claimed Patricia was a dedicated volunteer being persecuted for trying to improve the community. But when Jennifer Vega asked him about the criminal charges and financial irregularities, he had no good answers. The segment ended with me standing in my now cleared fabrication yard, saying, "I just want to run my business in peace. The HOA has no authority over my property, and Patricia Matthews needs to accept that and move on." The story went viral locally. By Saturday morning, it had been picked up by national HOA horror story websites and Reddit communities. My phone was ringing constantly with interview requests, messages of support, and even a few angry calls from Patricia's supporters accusing me of destroying her life. The following Tuesday, the HOA held another emergency meeting, this time specifically to vote on removing Patricia as president. Tom Chen invited me to attend as his guest, and I figured why not. I wanted to see how this played out. The meeting was held at the community center, a nice building at the heart of the development. About 60 homeowners showed up, which Tom said was 3 times the normal attendance. Patricia was there with her attorney, sitting in the front row looking defiant. The board vice president, a nervous man named Gary Cooper, called the meeting to order. He explained that the board had completed a preliminary audit of the finances and found significant irregularities, all tied to Patricia's Labyrinth project and other unauthorized expenditures. The audit shows that Patricia Matthews spent $43,000 of HOA funds without proper board authorization, Gary said. Additionally, she signed contracts on behalf of the HOA that exceeded her authority and exposed the association to legal liability. Patricia stood up, ignoring her attorney's attempt to stop her. "This is a witch hunt. I was trying to improve our community and I am being punished for it. Walter Reynolds is not even a member of this HOA, but he is destroying us from the outside." Several homeowners shouted back at her. The meeting devolved into chaos for several minutes before Gary managed to restore order. A homeowner I did not know stood up. "I want to know why Patricia thought she could spend $40,000 without asking any of us. That is our money. We pay dues every month, and she just wasted it on a project for property she did not even own." Another homeowner chimed in. "And now we are going to get sued. That construction company is already demanding payment for their full contract, plus damages. We could be looking at a $100,000 judgment." Patricia's face was red. "If everyone would just support me instead of undermining me, none of this would have happened. Walter Reynolds is the problem, not me." I stayed quiet, but Tom Chen stood up. "Patricia, Walter Reynolds owns his property legally. He has every right to refuse to join the HOA and to prevent you from building on his land. What you did was illegal, and now we are all paying the price for your ego." The room erupted in applause. Patricia looked around wildly, realizing she had lost the room completely. Gary called for the vote. Out of 60 homeowners present, 54 voted to remove Patricia as president immediately. 5 voted to keep her and 1 abstained. It was not even close. Patricia stood up, grabbed her purse, and stormed out with her attorney hurrying after her. The remaining homeowners spent another hour discussing how to fix the financial mess and whether they needed to assess additional dues to cover the costs. Gary approached me after the meeting. "Mr. Reynolds, on behalf of the board, I want to apologize for everything Patricia put you through. This was not how the HOA is supposed to operate." "I appreciate that," I said. "For the record, I do not have any problem with the HOA or the homeowners. I just want to be left alone to run my business." "Understood. You will not hear from us again unless you reach out first, and for what it is worth, we are exploring whether we can recover any of the money from Patricia personally." Over the next few weeks, things settled into a new normal. Patricia's criminal case moved through the court system. Her attorney negotiated a plea deal where she pled guilty to criminal mischief and fraud charges in exchange for dropping the illegal dumping and trespassing charges. She was sentenced to 2 years probation, 300 hours of community service, and ordered to pay restitution to both the HOA and to me. The restitution hearing was satisfying in a petty way. Patricia sat stone-faced, while the judge ordered her to pay the HOA $31,000 for the misspent funds, and to pay me $14,000 for damages to my business and property. Miss Matthews, the judge said, you abused a position of trust and engaged in a pattern of harassment and fraud against Mr. Reynolds. You are fortunate this court is willing to accept a plea agreement. Do you understand the terms? Yes, Your Honor, Patricia said quietly. Good. And let me be clear. If you violate the terms of your probation, you will serve 18 months in county jail. Do you understand that as well? Yes, Your Honor. The construction company also sued the HOA and eventually settled for $65,000. Combined with legal fees and the restitution, Patricia's little labyrinth scheme ended up costing the HOA over $120,000. The board had to implement a special assessment, charging each homeowner an extra $800 to cover the costs. Unsurprisingly, Patricia became the most hated person in the development. Several of her neighbors told me she eventually sold her house at a loss and moved to California. I never saw her again. The new HOA board was professional and reasonable. They focused on actual community issues like maintaining common areas and organizing neighborhood events. They never bothered me, and I never bothered them. A few homeowners even started bringing me business, commissioning custom work for their homes. My fabrication business thrived. The publicity from the news story brought in new clients who appreciated my willingness to stand up to bureaucratic nonsense. The $12,000 I made from selling the scrap metal covered my legal fees with some left over. About 6 months after everything settled, I was working in my shop when Tom Chen stopped by with a case of beer. Peace offering from the HOA, he said with a grin. Gary thought you might appreciate it. I took the beer and invited Tom in. We sat in my workshop, drinking cold ones and watching the sun set over the desert. You know, Tom said, most people would have just given up or moved away. Patricia was relentless. I have owned this property for 15 years, I said. I built this business from nothing. No way was I letting some power-hungry HOA president take that away from me. Well, you did the whole neighborhood a favor. Patricia was making everyone miserable, but nobody wanted to stand up to her. You showed everyone it was possible. I just did not want a labyrinth in my fabrication yard. Tom laughed. Fair enough. Although I have to say, scrapping it and selling the metal for profit was a genius move. Patricia is probably still furious about that. Good. Maybe next time she will think twice before messing with someone's property. We finished our beers and Tom headed home. I stayed in the workshop a while longer, looking around at the business I had built. The whole experience had been stressful and expensive, but in the end I had won. My property was secure, my business was growing, and Patricia Matthews was someone else's problem now. The metal labyrinth that was supposed to trap me in HOA bureaucracy had instead been cut apart and sold for scrap. There was a metaphor in there somewhere about the impermanence of petty tyranny and the resilience of people who refuse to be pushed around. Or maybe it was just a funny story about an HOA president who bit off more than she could chew. Either way, I was free to get back to what I did best. Fabricating metal, running my business, and living my life without interference from people who thought a title gave them power over others. As I locked up the workshop that night, I noticed the section of fence I had repaired after Patricia's goons cut through it. The new chain link was slightly shinier than the weathered original, a permanent reminder of the whole saga. I smiled and headed inside. The labyrinth was gone, scrapped and sold. But the lesson remained. Stand your ground, know your rights, and never let anyone bully you off your own property. It was a lesson Patricia Matthews had learned the hard way, and one I would never forget. 3 months later, I got a call from Rachel Chen with some interesting news. Walter, Remember how I filed a complaint with the Nevada Real Estate Division about Patricia's conduct? Yeah, what about it? They just completed their investigation. Patricia is being barred from serving on any HOA board in Nevada for 10 years. They also fined her personally $15,000 for violations of HOA governance laws. The decision was just published publicly. She must be thrilled about that, Rachel laughed. I doubt it. But there is more. The Real Estate Division used your case as an example in a new guidance document they are publishing about HOA overreach and property rights. They are using it to train HOA board members about what not to do. So Patricia's legacy is being the example of how not to run an HOA. Exactly. Your case is literally going to be taught in HOA management courses as an example of fraud, misuse of authority, and property rights violations. I had to laugh at the irony. Patricia had tried so hard to force me to comply with her vision of how the neighborhood should be, and instead, she had become a cautionary tale about the limits of HOA power. Life moved on. My business continued growing, and I took on bigger and more interesting projects. I fabricated a series of decorative metal sculptures for a casino on the Strip. I built custom security gates for a luxury home development in Summerlin. I even did some work for the city of Henderson, creating metal art installations for public parks. The property values in the neighborhood actually increased after Patricia left, mostly because the HOA started functioning properly under new leadership. They maintained the common areas, organized reasonable community events, and stayed in their lane regarding property rights. Several homeowners told me they appreciated that I had stood firm against Patricia's overreach. One day, about a year after the whole mess started, I was meeting with a potential client at a coffee shop when I overheard a conversation at the next table. Two women were talking about HOA problems in their neighborhood. And then the president tried to fine us for having the wrong color mailbox, one woman said. Can you believe that? The other woman nodded sympathetically. That is nothing. My friend's HOA tried to build something on his property without permission. He ended up scrapping it and selling the metal for profit. I nearly choked on my coffee. The first woman looked skeptical. That sounds made up. No, it really happened. It was all over the news last year. Some guy in Henderson who ran a metal shop. The HOA dumped like 50,000 pounds of metal in his yard, and he just sold it all, made $12,000. Good for him. More people need to stand up to these crazy HOA boards. I smiled and focused back on my meeting, but I felt a warm sense of satisfaction. My story had become part of the local folklore, a tale of resistance against bureaucratic overreach that people told each other when dealing with their own HOA frustrations. The client I was meeting with, a developer named Richard Santos, had been quiet during my momentary distraction. Now he leaned forward with an amused expression. That was you, was not it? The Henderson metal shop guy. Guilty, I admitted. Richard laughed and shook his head. I remember that story. Everyone in the development business was talking about it. Patricia Matthews, right? She tried to start a consulting business advising HOA boards, but nobody would hire her after that disaster. She tried to become an HOA consultant after everything that happened. Can you believe it? She thought her experience would be valuable. Turns out, being a cautionary tale about HOA abuse is not great for business. We finished our meeting and Richard ended up hiring me for a major project creating decorative metalwork for a new office building. As I drove back to my shop, I reflected on how the whole experience had actually helped my business rather than hurt it. The publicity had established me as someone who delivered quality work and did not back down from a fight. Those were valuable traits in the construction industry. That evening, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost did not answer, but something made me pick up. "Is this Walter Reynolds?" a woman's voice asked, speaking. "Who is this?" "My name is Olivia Brooks. I live in an HOA in Spring Valley, and I am having some problems similar to what you went through. Someone told me you might be willing to talk about it." I settled into my chair. "What kind of problems?" Over the next 30 minutes, Olivia explained that her HOA was trying to force her to remove a garden shed from her backyard, claiming it violated architectural guidelines. The problem was that she had gotten written approval for the shed from the previous board, but the new president was ignoring that approval and threatening daily fines. "The thing is," Olivia said, "I have all the documentation showing I followed the rules, but this president just does not care. She keeps saying the rules changed, but they never sent out any notification about changes. Have you talked to a lawyer? I cannot afford one right now. I am a single mom working 2 jobs. The shed cost me $3,000 that I saved up for a year. Now they are saying I have to tear it down or pay $50 a day in fines." I thought about Patricia and her abuse of power. I thought about how much Rachel Chen's expertise had helped me, and I thought about how lucky I was to have had the resources to fight back. "Olivia, let me give you my attorney's number. Rachel Chen specializes in HOA disputes. Tell her I referred you and that I am willing to cover your initial consultation fee. She can advise you on whether you have a case." There was silence on the other end. Then I heard Olivia start crying. "Are you serious? You would do that for a stranger? Someone has to stand up to these power-hungry board members. Might as well be me, even indirectly. Get a pen and write down this number." After I hung up with Olivia, I called Rachel and explained the situation. She agreed to take the consultation and said she would offer Olivia a reduced rate if the case had merit. "You are developing a reputation, Walter," Rachel said with amusement in her voice. "People are going to start calling you the HOA Slayer. I just do not like bullies." "Well, keep sending them my way. I have built an entire practice area around HOA disputes thanks to the publicity from your case." Over the following months, I heard from several other homeowners dealing with HOA overreach. I could not help everyone financially, but I shared my story, offered advice, and connected people with resources. A few times, just the threat of publicity about another HOA abuse case was enough to make boards back down. Olivia's case turned out well. Rachel sent a strongly worded letter citing Nevada HOA laws about retroactive rule changes and the documentation of prior approval. The HOA president backed down immediately, probably not wanting to become the next Patricia Matthews viral story. 2 years after the Labyrinth incident, I expanded my business. I bought an additional acre of land adjacent to my property and built a second workshop. Business was good enough that I hired 2 full-time employees and started taking on commercial projects throughout Nevada and even into California. The expansion required dealing with permits and zoning, which meant interacting with the Henderson Planning Department. The day I went to submit my permits, I ran into Gary Cooper, the former HOA vice president who had taken over after Patricia's removal. "Walter," he said warmly, shaking my hand. "I heard you were expanding. Congratulations." "Thanks. How have things been with the HOA?" "Quiet, which is exactly how they should be. We have learned our lesson about staying in our lane and not overreaching. Actually, we have become something of a model in the area. Other HOAs ask us for advice on how to function properly." "That is quite a turnaround from the Patricia days," Gary grimaced. "Do not remind me. But honestly, that whole mess was a wake-up call for a lot of us. We realized we had let one person accumulate too much power without oversight. Now we have proper checks and balances, transparent finances, and we actually communicate with homeowners before making decisions. Sounds revolutionary, I said with a smile. It should not be, but apparently it is. Anyway, good luck with the expansion. If you ever need anything from the neighborhood, let me know. The expansion went smoothly, and within 6 months I had doubled my production capacity. The second workshop specialized in larger architectural pieces, while the original workshop focused on custom and precision work. One afternoon, I was supervising the installation of a large metal sculpture at a resort in Henderson when my phone rang. It was Detective Morrison, who I had not heard from since Patricia's case closed. "Mr. Reynolds, this is a courtesy call. Patricia Matthews was just arrested again." "What for?" "She moved to Sacramento and apparently joined her HOA board there. She was just charged with embezzling $20,000 from that HOA to fund personal expenses. The Sacramento police contacted us because her Nevada conviction came up in their investigation." "You have got to be kidding me." "I wish I was. Some people never learn. She is looking at real prison time this time because it is a second offense. I thought you would want to know." After hanging up, I just shook my head in amazement. Patricia had been given a second chance, probation instead of jail, and she had immediately gone out and done the same thing again. Some people really were their own worst enemy. The years continued passing. My business became one of the premier metal fabrication shops in southern Nevada. I won awards for some of my architectural work. I even got featured in a couple of trade magazines. The Labyrinth story still came up occasionally, usually when someone was researching HOA horror stories, but it became a smaller part of my identity as other accomplishments piled up. 5 years after the incident, I was invited to speak at a property rights conference in Las Vegas. The organizers wanted me to share my story as an example of how to stand up to organizational overreach. I agreed, figuring it might help someone else avoid or fight back against similar problems. The conference was held at a casino conference center, and about 200 people attended my panel. I told the story from beginning to end, including the illegal dumping and my decision to scrap the metal. The audience loved it, laughing at the appropriate parts and asking insightful questions afterward. During the Q&A, a young man stood up. "Mr. Reynolds, do you have any regrets about how you handled the situation?" I thought about it carefully. "Honestly, no. I wish it had not been necessary, and I wish Patricia Matthews had not been so determined to abuse her power. But I do not regret standing my ground or the methods I used to fight back. Everything I did was legal and appropriate. I protected my property and my business." An older woman raised her hand next. "What advice would you give to someone just starting to deal with HOA problems?" "Document everything," I said immediately. "Every letter, every email, every conversation if possible. Know your property rights and your local laws. And do not be afraid to get a lawyer early. I spent a few $1,000s on legal fees, but it saved me from potentially losing my entire business. That is cheap insurance." The panel went well, and several people came up afterward to share their own HOA horror stories and thank me for speaking out. One man told me he had been fighting his HOA for 3 years over solar panels, and my story had inspired him to hire a lawyer and push back harder. He eventually won, and his HOA changed their rules to allow solar installations. That night, sitting in my hotel room overlooking the Las Vegas Strip, I thought about how one incident had rippled out in unexpected ways. Patricia's attempt to build a labyrinth on my property had led to her downfall. Reforms in her HOA, changes in how Nevada regulated HOAs, a cautionary tale used in training courses, inspiration for other homeowners fighting similar battles, and expansion of my business. The metal panels she had dumped as trash had been transformed into $12,000 and a symbol of resistance. The attempt to trap me in bureaucracy had instead freed dozens of other people from similar situations. Patricia had tried to use her power to diminish me, and instead, she had accidentally made me stronger. I returned home the next day to find my employees handling everything smoothly. The business was running well enough that I did not need to micromanage every detail anymore. I had built something sustainable and valuable, and nobody could take that away. A few weeks later, I got a letter from the Nevada Real Estate Division. They were doing a 5-year follow-up on Patricia's case and wanted to know if I had experienced any further problems with HOAs or property rights violations. I wrote back that everything had been quiet and that the local HOA had been professional and appropriate in all dealings. The Real Estate Division representative who had handled the case called me after receiving my letter. "Mr. Reynolds, I want to thank you for your cooperation during our investigation. Your case led to significant reforms in how we oversee HOA operations in Nevada. We have much stricter requirements now for financial oversight and property rights compliance. Happy to have helped, even if I did not intend to start a reform movement." She laughed. "The best changes often come from people who are just trying to solve their own immediate problem. By standing up for yourself, you made things better for thousands of homeowners across the state." After the call ended, I sat in my workshop and looked around at everything I had built. The business, the reputation, the expanded property, all of it had survived and thrived despite Patricia's best efforts to destroy it. The fabrication yard where she had tried to build her labyrinth was now full of raw materials and works in progress. The fence she had ordered cut was repaired and stronger than before. The property she had tried to steal was fully mine, protected by clear legal boundaries and my willingness to defend them. I thought about the labyrinth, that maze of metal walls intended to beautify the community or maybe just to satisfy Patricia's ego. She had never actually explained why she wanted to build it on my property specifically, whether it was strategic placement or just spite. In the end, it did not matter. The labyrinth existed only as scrap metal now, sold off and repurposed into other projects by whoever bought it from Marcus. Sometimes late at night, when I was working alone in the shop, I wondered what my life would have been like if I had just accepted the labyrinth. If I had been passive and let Patricia have her way. Would she have stopped there, or would it have been the first step in gradually taking over my entire property? I knew the answer. Bullies never stopped when you gave in. They saw compliance as weakness and pushed harder. By fighting back immediately and decisively, I had drawn a line that could not be crossed. Patricia had tested that line several times and lost every time, until finally, she had destroyed herself trying to break through. The metal labyrinth had been her biggest gamble and her biggest failure. She had tried to create a permanent structure on my property, something I could not easily remove, that would have given the HOA a foothold for future claims. Instead, she had handed me valuable scrap metal and evidence of criminal conduct. I finished my work for the evening and locked up the shop. Walking across the yard to my house, I could see lights on in the homes of the development surrounding my property. Good people lived there, families and retirees who just wanted a nice place to live. They were not responsible for Patricia's actions, and I had never blamed them. The new HOA board understood the proper role of a homeowners association, maintaining common property, organizing community activities, and enforcing reasonable rules that homeowners had agreed to. They did not try to expand their authority beyond their legitimate boundaries or harass people who were not part of their organization. As I reached my front door, I looked back at the fabrication yard one more time. No labyrinth, no illegal structures, no HOA interference. Just my property, my business, my life on my terms. That was worth every minute of stress and every dollar of legal fees. The story of Walter Reynolds and the HOA Labyrinth became one of those local legends that people in Henderson told each other. A reminder that sometimes the little guy wins against institutional power. Not because of luck or connections, but because of knowledge, determination, and the willingness to stand up for what was right. Patricia Matthews, wherever she was now, hopefully serving time in a California prison for her second round of embezzlement, had learned that power without accountability eventually destroys itself. She had been given authority by the HOA board and had abused it so thoroughly that she lost everything. Her position, her reputation, her freedom, and probably most of her assets paying restitution and legal fees. Meanwhile, I was thriving, building, and creating. The metal she had tried to use to trap me had been transformed into profit and progress. The business she had tried to sabotage had expanded beyond what I had imagined 5 years earlier. The property she had tried to steal was more valuable than ever. In the end, it was not about revenge or victory. It was about the fundamental right to own property and use it as I saw fit within the law. That right was worth defending, and I would do it again if necessary. But hopefully, the message had been sent clearly enough that no one would be stupid enough to try. As I settled into bed that night, I thought once more about the labyrinth, that phantom maze that never actually existed except as a pile of panels in my yard for a few days. Patricia had wanted to build something permanent, a monument to her vision of community improvement. Instead, she had created a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked authority. The metal was gone, scrapped and sold and transformed into whatever Marcus's clients had needed. But the lesson remained, as permanent as the property boundaries that protected my land. Know your rights, document everything, and never let anyone bully you off your own property, no matter what title or authority they claim to have. That was the real legacy of the labyrinth that never was, the maze that became scrap metal, the HOA project that ended in criminal charges and reform. Sometimes standing your ground is the only path forward, even when it leads through conflict and stress and legal battles. I closed my eyes, satisfied and secure in my home on my property, surrounded by the business I had built and protected. Tomorrow, I would wake up and do it all again. Fabricate metal, serve clients, and live my life without interference from people who thought they knew better. The labyrinth was gone, but I remained. And that was exactly how it should be.